Welcome back to Andersen Acres. Today we're diving into one of the most beloved little goat breeds out there, the African Pygmy. These goats might be small, but they've got big personalities, and I think you'll see why so many people fall in love with them and why they're so popular on hobby farms. Whether you're curious about goats for a hobby farm, a family pet, or just want to know more about one of the most popular miniature breeds, this video is for you. Now let's start with where the African pygmy goat comes from. These goats trace their roots back to West Africa, particularly Cameroon, and the traders brought them to Europe and later North America in the mid 20th century. They immediately captured attention because of their compact size and charming personalities. Unlike big dairy breeds like the Alpines or the Nubians, pygmies weren't bred to be commercial producers of milk or meat. Instead, they were kept as companion animals. They were novelty stock, for small scale areas, small scale meat animals. Over the years, their popularity has only grown, especially with hobby farmers like us. So, what do they look like? Well, pygmies are true miniature goats. Adult pygmies usually stand between 16 and 23 inches tall at the withers, so that's at their shoulder, right? And they typically weigh between 35 and 60 pounds. Males are bigger and heavier than females. They're sturdy, compact, and kind of barrel-shaped with their short legs and broad body. Their coats come in a whole rainbow of colors. They can be black, caramel, gray, agouti, even spotted and patterned variations. Both bucks and does can grow horns and sport beards, which only adds to their quirky look. One thing that really stands out is how well proportioned they are. They're not lanky or delicate the way some miniature animals can be. Instead, they look solid and balanced and healthy, almost like a full-size goat that just hung out in the dryer too long. So let's talk about their personalities, because this is where African pygmies really shine. These goats are known for being incredibly friendly, curious, and playful. Many owners compare them to dogs in how they bond with people. They love attention, they'll follow you around, they have a knack for getting into whatever you're doing. Because of this, pygmies are a favorite for families and petting zoos and 4-H projects all around the world. They're generally gentle and they get along well with most other animals, including chickens. And some breeds of goats don't get along great with chickens, and these guys tend to. That being said, like all goats, they can be a little bit mischievous. Just a little bit, that's chicken. But they can be a little mischievous, and you'll need to goat-proof your fences if you don't want them testing their limits and going on merry journeys without you. They're goats. They might be little, but they are still goats. So, what are they actually good for on a hobby farm? Well, they're not the highest producing goats. You can still milk them, okay? You're not going to get as much milk as you will from a true dairy breed, but you can still milk them. A healthy doe could give you 1 to 2 quarts of milk a day when she's at her peak production. It's not a lot, but the milk is rich and high in butterfat, which makes it perfect for cheese making and yogurt or just enjoying a sweeter, creamier glass of milk, if that's your thing. Some people also raise pygmies for meat. They're not nearly as efficient as the true meat breeds like boars or some of the other really big guys because they're smaller. Their main value is really as companions and as a source of joy and entertainment, but they are goats and they can be used for meat, if that's your thing. But for many hobby farmers, the companionship is more than enough, and that's why a lot of us get them. Now, like all goats, pygmies need secure fencing. Don't let their size fool you. They're escape artists and they'll test every corner of your pen. A 4-foot fence is usually enough, but it does need to be sturdy. They also need a dry shelter, especially in cold or wet climates. Since their small size does make them a little more vulnerable to the elements than bigger goats, still they are hardy creatures. Remember that goats are herd animals, even pygmies, and a single pygmy will probably be lonely and a little bit stressed. You want at least 2, preferably more, or at least some kind of friend. You don't want just one goat out in your backyard by himself. He needs companionship. They're also browsers instead of grazers. Now, what that means is they love to munch on shrubs and weeds and brush. They don't necessarily love to eat grass quite as much. They still will eat grass, but you're more likely to find them off eating in the bush than eating the grass at your feet. Okay? So it does make them excellent little yard cleaners, though you'll want to protect any of the plants you don't want eaten because they don't distinguish between the brush you want gone and your pumpkin plants. So make sure you've fenced off the plants you don't want them to eat. Now, health-wise, pygmies are generally pretty hardy creatures, but you'll still need to stay on top of their vaccinations and their hoof trimming and their parasite control. Their small size makes handling them a lot easier compared to the full-size breeds, which is another reason they're so popular, because they're little and they're easier to handle. And we all love easier to handle, don't we? So why would anyone choose pygmies over other breeds? Well, for one, they don't take up as much space. Smaller goats are good for smaller operations, okay? If you've got a small homestead or a small hobby farm or just a couple of acres, they're a really great choice. You can have a handful of goats and not have too much property. They're also easier to physically handle because they're just not as strong, right? So they're good there too. I can handle a dozen pygmy goats a lot easier than I can handle a dozen boar or a dozen alpine, just because they're that much smaller and they're just not quite as strong. Okay, they're just not quite as strong. So if you have like children or folks who don't want to wrestle a 200-pound buck, you might, sorry, there's flies, but you might want to, thank you, Lonesome, you might want to investigate pygmies, see if they're right for you, okay? Because you don't necessarily want to wrestle a 200-pound goat every time you have to trim hooves. That's annoying. But the biggest reason people choose them is actually their personality. These goats bring joy. They're funny and they're clever, and they've got a way of making you laugh, even on the hardest days. That's something every farmer needs now and then. So sometimes, even large operations, they'll have a couple of pygmies just for the companionship. Thank you, chicken. But that is about it for us here today at Andersen Acres. Have you ever raised or met an African pygmy goat? We had our little Gandalf and he was fantastic. But I'd love to hear your experiences down in the comments below. They're such a unique breed and every goat has its own personality. I'd really love to hear about yours. Thanks a lot for spending some time with me here today, and we'll see you tomorrow.